the last time I was with you was the day before your Tulsa rally, and you were saying big, huge crowd, it was indoors.
By the way,
these people, they
it
listen
was
to
a big,
you.
excuse me, Jonathan.
Yeah.
We had a 19,000 seat stadium. First of all, we had 12,000 people, not 6,000.
You told Fox News that you couldn't say whether you'd accept the results of the 2020 election. What would that actually look
Hillary
like?
Clinton never accepted them.
She went totally.
She still doesn't accept them. You know, there are those that say you can test too much. You do know that.
Who says that?
Oh, just read the manuals, read the books.
Manuals?
Read the books.
What manuals?
Read the books.
What books?
Wait a minute, John. Let me explain. We have a new phenomenon, mail-in voting.
It's been here since the Civil War. Let's move to Portland. I'm sure you've seen the footage of the Navy veteran.
No.
Well,
here you go. The fake news.
So what you just saw there was a promo clip from Axios on HBO and their interview via Jonathan Swan with Donald Trump. And they're going to talk about a lot of things. Now, you've seen a few clips on isolated topics floating around the internet, but this is the official promo for the interview airing next week. And what you can tell from this is that much like Trump's interview with Chris Wallace on Fox News, it's going to be an absolute disaster for Donald Trump. And the reason I say that is because this interview, unlike so many of the other interviews Donald Trump has done over the years and the media coverage Trump has gotten over the years, there's actual pushback when Trump says something that's blatantly false or that's blatantly misconstrued or that's clearly Trump trying to inject a purely opinion-based analysis even when that opinion is dead wrong. And what you're seeing is that whenever Trump gets pushback, he barely ever has anything to say about it. All he can do is point to vague notes, vague studies. All he can do is shout the words fake news. You see it in this clip, just 3 or 4 instances where basically he said, we followed expert opinion on the crisis, on this medical crisis we're facing. And then Jonathan Swan simply asks, what surveys, what journals? And Trump's about journals and surveys. And he asked Trump about not conceding the election, as he noted in the Chris Wallace interview. And he says, well, Hillary never conceded the election, which is not true because Hillary Clinton conceded the next day. And while I would acknowledge that Hillary Clinton was a sore loser in that election, she did not try to occupy the White House. She did not try to deny Trump his speech at his inauguration. She was there supporting his inauguration as an observer. She conceded the election. He may not. And simply saying, but Hillary Clinton, is not good enough. It's a sidestep. With regard to mail-in voting, which Trump has attacked even more so in recent weeks because he knows if Americans can vote easily, accessibly, and safely, he will lose. He said, well, it's dangerous for the election. And as Swan notes, they've been voting by mail since at least the Civil War. They've been doing it in some states as the default way of voting for decades now. It's nothing new. He has nothing to say for that either. And when it brings up the fact around the protesters in Portland and in other places with the veterans and the moms, and he says, well, no, that's fake news. Tying into that narrative that a lot of these more sympathetic protesters that you've been seeing are simply actors. They're sort of plants by the left, by the Democrats, by the media to make Donald Trump and his allies and the police look bad. They're not the real protesters. It's fake news. All of this shows the shallowness of Donald Trump, the weakness of Donald Trump, the inability for him to actually face political scrutiny and do so in a way that doesn't make him looking worse than he came in on the interview. Again, we saw it with Chris Wallace. We saw it in that interview. I did at least a couple videos on that interview where all Chris Wallace would say is, sir, that's not true. Here's the evidence. Can you provide evidence that actually, substantiates your point? And he couldn't. He asked about the defunding police. He said it was in the Bernie Biden task force. Trump went to go get the document, and as Chris Wallace notes, there was a lot of stuff in there that Trump didn't like, but there was nothing about defunding the police in the Bernie Biden task force documents. There just wasn't. When he asked Trump about a whole bunch of things, Trump could not offer a concrete answer. He just couldn't. And he flailed around, and it was like a rag doll in the wind. And it was a clear sign that, one, it was a good interview. Kudos to Chris Wallace. And this looks like it's shaping up to be a good interview from Jonathan Swan. But specifically, it shows the failure of mainstream media regarding Donald Trump and how they've interviewed him for at least the last 5 years, and even going back into his pre-political career, how he got softball interview after softball interview, always really ignoring his personal, economic, and political scandals. And this is one of the reasons he became president. We remember this, not just the interviews, but the way that he was covered at his rallies and press conferences, where especially when he was running for the Republican nomination and for president, before he came to power, he basically was allowed to say whatever he wanted, and media wouldn't push back. They gave him millions of dollars of free advertising to lie to the journalists and to the American people, lie about his policies, lie about his opponent's policies, and that's one of the reasons he became president. Now, media, to some degree, has shifted how they cover politicians. Well, they'll do more real-time fact-checking. But in general, with interviews, the Chris Wallace one was so special because by doing his job, he exposed Donald Trump. And my hope is that Jonathan Swan interview does much the same. It certainly looks like it's going to, and the interview airs Monday night, and once it airs, I'm certain that we'll be doing more coverage on it. Let people know about this interview, because guys, the way it's shaping up, it might be just as bad for Trump, maybe even worse than the Chris Wallace interview.